Okay, welcome. If you've never been here before, thank you for stopping by. I'm going to be painting a Space Marine. This guy is from the 40k Leviathan box. If you're just getting into 40k, I know a lot of new players usually go for Space Marines. They're pretty easy to get a hold of. This one is from the Leviathan box, which came out in this past July, summer of 2023. He's already been built and primed in white, and these are the colors I'm using. Here we have SPEEDpaint by Army Painter, and also Citadel contrast colors. These are probably the most common paints that you can find if you have a local game shop close by. You're pretty much gonna find Citadel or Army Painter. There are a lot of other brands, but these are the two most common that I've seen. These are different from acrylics because they're meant to go on white paint or light paint. It doesn't have to be white, it could be light. This model's been primed in white. So I'm just going to start with the contrast paint, Nazdrag yellow. So I'm starting on the symbol on the chest because most of the armor is going to be blue, so it's if I highlight or go over the chest piece first, I can go around it with the blue later. It's better to start with the light colors because if you mess up with yellow and you cover it with blue, it's not really you're not really going to see too much of it. The good thing about contrast and speed paints is you can always go back and just paint white over any mistakes that you make. So there's the yellow. So with that one done, I'm going to move on to Pallid Bone speed paint. Whoops, dropped them there. The Pallid Bone is going to go on the small cloth that he has hanging from his weapon. And for the same reason I did the chest piece, I did this first so that I can go around it later when I paint the gun. So that goes on pretty quickly, and then Blood Angel's red is going to go on the small wax, the wax seal that he's got on there. It's very small, so you just really dab it on there. And with those done, I can move on to painting the armor. So this one I'm using Talisar blue contrast paint. It's not ultramarines blue. The blue space marines I usually see are ultramarines. There is an ultramarines contrast color that you can buy from Citadel, which is a contrast color, but this is the only one that I have currently, so this is the one I'm using. It's a little bit lighter than Space Marines blue. So I'm using kind of a big thick brush for this one because there's a lot of surface area. So you just want to slather it on. Don't be afraid to put a lot of paint on the brush. If you get too little paint on the brush and you start scraping it across the surface, there's not gonna be enough to get into the nooks and crannies. So you have to be pretty generous with it. Now the more paint you put on, if there is too much paint, it will start to pool in certain areas, so it'll collect, and you'll see it'll start to collect in certain areas. But all you need to do is just grab wash off your paintbrush and then just dab it onto those areas, and the brush will suck it right up. I did speed up the video on this part just because it's getting all the armor covered is the longest step. The next color is Gravelord Gray speed paint. That's going to be for the weapon. With the weapon done, we can move on to the pouches. So we're going to use speed paint hardened leather. What's really cool about these speed paints is that they have a mixing ball inside of them. So when you mix them, there's a ball mixing around, jumping around in there, getting the paint mixed up. Really nice. So if you haven't touched your paint for a while, it's really good at mixing it for you. So with all the colors blocked off, we can start working on the base. I usually paint the bases black. If I'm using contrast, everything's white, so I paint it black. This is just some craft paint. The craft paint that you can get at Hobby Lobby, Walmart. That paint's really good for bases, or if you're painting terrain. I think these are 50 cents to $1 for a bottle. So I'm going to let that dry, and I'll be back to finish the last step. So with the base dry, we're going to work on the basing. The quickest way that I find to do this is to just throw some glue down on the base and then just put some sand. Here is just a mixture of sand and tiny pebbles that I have. The sand is regular sand, play sand. I think that was from Home Depot, and the little bag of pebbles I got from a dollar store. Just mixed those two together and got this mixture. And the glue is just regular old Elmer's glue. So we're just going to put some glue to the base. You want to spread it around with a fairly old brush, cheap brush. It doesn't have to be anything special. It could be a dollar store brush, any old brush that you may have lying around. Usually when you're painting, you want to have a few old brushes for this purpose. Usually for basing or for applying paint to terrain or those sorts of things. So it's pretty simple. You just cover the base in glue, and then we're just going to dip it into the sand mixture. Just going to dip it in there carefully and just make sure the sand covers all the glue, and just tap off the excess. Now this step I usually do after I build the model. So I glue the model together, and then I do this step, apply the glue and put the sand on, and I let that dry usually overnight, and then I'll prime the model. So I'll spray the model white or whichever color I'm using. But here we have the base on, so I'm just going to let that dry. and then we'll come back to paint it. So I want to show this model. This is what it looks like usually when I apply the base on first, let the glue dry, and then I prime the whole model. In this case, the whole model is primed with the texture on the base. That way it seals it in. That way all the little rocks, sand, none of that will fall off. Over time, the sand sometimes will rub off, start to fall off. So with everything dry, we can start to paint the base. So all I'm doing is using white craft glue. I'm just going to cover it in white and then apply the contrast on top. So with this white paint, I'm adding water to it just so that it can, since it's going over all this coarse sand, I want it kind of watery so it can, it's easier to get all over the sand. That way it gets all into the nooks and crannies and it covers the whole thing. If you just apply thick paint onto it, it's going to be hard to cover everything. And we just need to let that dry, and we'll put the contrast paint on top. Okay, then now that it's dry, we can use hardened leather again for the sand. There's also another color, the speed paint, sand golem is a nice base color. It's more of an orange, lighter orange color. This one is just brown. And there we have the base covered. The base is done. And you kind of notice that some of the paint came off on top. So I'm just taking a little bit of color and just applying it really quick to the top of the head. And there's our first Space Marine. So if you do this in batches, maybe paint 4 or 5 at once, going through these steps, you can get your army going in no time. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. I appreciate you making it if you made it this far. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.